Chapter 4 of Your Virtual Companion, a Good Omens fanfiction, written by AppleSeeds, read aloud by SkyAsimaru. If you enjoy this podfic, you can check out the original story on Archive of Our Own. If you would like to hear more of my recordings or see some of my own work, you can find me through the pen and screen name of SkyAsimaru. Your Virtual Companion, Chapter 4, The Moon and the Log Cabin. Summary. With his feelings for Aziraphale intensifying, Crowley becomes intrigued by the way the hologram responds to him.
Good evening, Crowley. It's so good to see you,
Aziraphale greeted him brightly. Crowley immediately felt some of the tension draining from his muscles, the pressure releasing from his temples, the aching void inside of him closing in on itself like a wound being stitched back together. None of it came as a surprise. Crowley had known how badly he needed this, although acknowledging it triggered an unsettling feeling in his gut.
Hi, Angel. It's really good to see you too,
Crowley responded, maintaining a considerable degree of control over himself. His words were nothing short of an enormous understatement. Crowley's last session with Aziraphale had been absolutely incredible, and had actually, as ridiculous as it felt to admit this, felt like a date. Crowley had been preoccupied with thoughts of Aziraphale ever since, and now that he was actually standing in front of him again, his heart was racing, and his stomach afflicted with a serious case of butterflies.
How have you been?
Aziraphale asked politely.
The usual. How about you?
I'm fine, thank you. I've missed you.
Aziraphale spoke so fondly, and his words made Crowley's stomach swoop. Perhaps allowing himself to routinely indulge in thoughts of Aziraphale had been a mistake, as the undeniable attraction he was experiencing towards him had evidently got stronger in the intervening days. Fearing that Aziraphale would be able to discern his reaction, Crowley panicked and tried to deflect his attention away from it.
How much time has to pass between sessions to trigger your programming to say that?
Crowley listened to the words leaving his mouth and regretted them immediately, inwardly cursing himself. Aziraphale began, immediately stalling, eyes full of sadness that tugged at Crowley's heart. Crowley had already formed the impression that Aziraphale didn't like to be reminded of what he was, how different they were from each other. Guilt gnawed away at his insides.
I just missed you, Crowley.
I've missed you too, Angel,
Crowley responded sincerely, willing himself to settle, to get a hold on himself and not say any more stupid things.
I'm sorry I didn't come back sooner. I wanted to, but we can only leave the house once a week now, and there was stuff I needed to do.
Yes, of course. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm here now. I've been really looking forward to talking to you, Angel. To be honest, I've hardly thought about anything else,
Crowley added, attempting to repair the damage he'd caused. Aziraphale smiled, some of the tension lifting from his face.
I've been looking forward to it too. What background would you like for our session today?
I've actually been thinking about that, and remember I told you I had money saved that I hadn't been able to use for what I wanted?
Yes?
Well, I've always wanted to go into space, visit one of the lunar habitats and see the biomes. And don't suppose you have something like that as a background, do you? It'd be the closest I'm ever going to get.
I'm afraid there isn't a background available for a lunar habitat. However, there is one of the moon's surface. Would you like to see it?
That sounds great, thanks.
A few seconds later, the background changed to display the vast black expanse of space, studded with twinkling stars. The rocky terrain of the moon was visible at the bottom on all four sides, as though the two of them were standing on its surface, and on one wall a partial view of the striking blue-green orb of the earth could be seen in the distance.
Ah, I love it. Thanks, Angel.
Aziraphale dipped his chin and smiled, his hands coming together in front of him at his waist.
I'm glad you like it.
It looks amazing, don't you think? You know, when people first started going up into space, even the first regular people when space tourism started out, apparently they were all coming back saying they had this newfound respect for how small and fragile the Earth was and how it needed to be protected. It didn't change a damn thing, though, did it?
No, I suppose not.
I would have loved to have seen this for real.
I'm sorry, Crowley.
It's okay. This is the next best thing. And this way, you're here to enjoy it with me.
That made Aziraphale smile warmly at him, prompting Crowley's stomach to flop over. He drew in a deep breath, trying to calm his quickening pulse.
Do you know much about space?
Aziraphale asked.
Oh, yeah, of course I do. I had the big book of astronomy as a kid,
Crowley replied with a chuckle.
I used to have a telescope too, but, well, I'll bet you can guess what happened to that, eh?
Oh, did you have to relinquish it in the amnesty?
Got it in one. Unsanctioned surveillance equipment, they called it. Who knew my hobbies of astronomy and botany was such a threat to national security, eh?
These are troubling times indeed.
Well, that's certainly one way to put it. Anyway, that's enough of that. We're not going to talk about topics potentially detrimental to my psychological well-being, right?
Right.
So, how much do you know about space?
Hardly anything.
Would you like to?
Aziraphale's expression brightened even more.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Shall we?
Crowley gestured towards the chairs. He flopped down into the one on the right, as always, and Aziraphale sat primly beside him in the other. At first, they both looked out towards the image of the distant Earth. But as Crowley began to share some of the interesting facts he could remember about the stars, planets, and other astronomical phenomena, Aziraphale trained his gaze intently on him, listening with rapt attention. Crowley's throat began to feel quite dry, more from nerves than from talking so much, and he wished for the first time that he was allowed to bring water into the room with him. The way Aziraphale was looking at him made it feel like someone was stirring up his insides with a giant spoon, and Crowley was struggling to concentrate on what he was saying. He tried to remember some of what he'd learnt about the physics of what actually happens inside a star, and didn't even try to deny himself that he was only doing so because he thought it might impress Aziraphale.
The sun's going to turn into a red giant eventually, so it's not like we're going to be around forever anyway, I suppose.
How long will it be until that happens?
Okay, probably like 5 billion years, but my point is, the world had to end sometime, eh?
Well, I would much prefer it if it didn't. Certainly not any time soon. I haven't given up hope.
I know you haven't. I kind of like your optimism, to be honest. Could do with a bit more of that in my life. I wasn't convinced at first, but you know what? It really does help.
I'm very happy to hear that. Crowley winked at him, and Aziraphale smiled and dipped his chin. Eyes trained on his hands, folded neatly in his lap. Crowley's heart fluttered.
You know, I've been thinking,
he ventured. About what?
About you.
Oh?
Yeah. I've been wondering why they don't create a version of you to interact with using VR at home. There'd be a huge demand for it, especially with the tightening of the quarantine orders. I mean, I know it wouldn't be like this. It's nice not to have to wear a headset, and this definitely feels a lot more real. The way you learn from other people and stuff. It'd still be amazing to be able to talk to a version of you at home, though. I guess I'm just surprised it's not an option.
A VR companion would not provide the same level of experience.
I think I just said that,
Crowley said lightly.
But how do you mean?
The interaction possible with a live companion is much more sophisticated and realistic than with a home companion.
Wait, a home companion? You mean it is a thing?
Yes, that product is available for purchase from the Eden website. The home companion can be downloaded for use with any virtual reality headset.
So I really could have you home with me to keep me company?
Crowley asked, his voice laced with excitement that he couldn't hope to conceal. The fluttery feeling in his gut intensified as he thought about it. Would he just have the same choice of artificial backgrounds, or would he be able to use augmented reality? Make it seem like Aziraphale was really there? Crowley pictured Aziraphale sitting on the sofa with him, maybe even on the edge of his bed, and his pulse quickened even more. No, Aziraphale replied, abruptly obliterating Crowley's fantasy. Live companions are not available as home companions.
Oh, too bad.
It really wouldn't be a comparable experience, Aziraphale insisted, like he was trying to make a case for his own superiority. The capabilities of a home companion are significantly limited compared with those of a live companion. Aziraphale made a valid point. Even if there were a version of him that Crowley could interact with at home, it might have looked and sounded like Aziraphale, but it wouldn't actually be him.
It's okay, Angel. You've convinced me. And don't worry, I definitely won't be replacing you. Wouldn't dream of it. You know, as sad as maybe this is, you're actually my best friend.
Oh, thank you, Crowley.
That's very kind of you to say."
Aziraphale paused and smiled at him before adding,
"And you're my favorite client."
Crowley laughed. It was always fun to see how Aziraphale responded to things that were presumably pretty unexpected.
"I think you probably have to say that."
Crowley's tone was light, but he did want to believe what Aziraphale had said, particularly as he'd had cause to be concerned that the opposite might in fact be true.
"I can understand why you would feel that way, but I can only give you my assurance that it's the truth. Please believe me."
"Okay, I believe you,"
Crowley said softly.
"That's really sweet of you to say. So, what is it you like about me?"
"Oh, all sorts of things,"
Aziraphale replied enthusiastically.
"Oh, yeah? Really?"
Crowley's mouth stretched into an involuntary grin.
"Thanks."
Crowley was tempted to press for details, and did spend a little time wondering if maybe he should have. But he was afraid that if he did, Aziraphale's response might shatter the fragile film of illusion that he was only just about managing to maintain.
"You got a joke for me today?"
he asked instead. Aziraphale smiled and nodded.
"Yeah? Go on then."
"What language do billboards speak?"
There was such a pure, innocent joy to him. The way Aziraphale seemed to be fighting not to laugh. The way his eyes twinkled with amusement and anticipation. It was impressive, really. He was impressive.
"I don't know, Angel. What language do billboards speak?"
"Sign language."
Crowley immediately suppressed his laughter, biting his gum and trying very hard to stare impassively at Aziraphale, who was giggling in a way that was, quite frankly, adorable. Crowley stretched his arms above his head.
"Yeah, okay, yeah, you know what? I think that's enough for today."
Crowley clapped his palms on his thighs and moved as if to stand to leave. Aziraphale reached out, his hand passing through Crowley's arm.
"Oh, please don't go. I'm sorry. I thought you'd like it."
"Hey, no, I'm not actually going. It's okay. I was just teasing you."
Crowley laughed, and Aziraphale visibly relaxed. It was a strange thing how unsure of himself he seemed to be at times. Perhaps it was a consequence of being programmed to put his client's happiness before everything else, and therefore the likelihood of regular payments to Eden, a voice in the back of Crowley's mind interjected, unable to completely shake off his cynical nature, no matter how much he had come to care for Aziraphale.
"That was a brilliant joke, Angel. I absolutely loved it."
Crowley laid it on thick, anticipating the reaction it would earn him. When Aziraphale's face lit up, his cheeks rounding and the corners of his eyes crinkling as he gave Crowley a beaming smile, Crowley felt a pleasant rush of warmth course through him. Crowley locked eyes with Aziraphale and smiled fondly in return, watching with intense curiosity as the gesture seemed to induce a deeper flush across his cheeks. Aziraphale turned away slightly and began adjusting the hem of his waistcoat, almost like a nervous habit, spiking Crowley's curiosity even more. Aziraphale's ribs rose as he appeared to take a deep breath before turning back to Crowley, a sweet, bashful smile on his face. Without giving himself time to talk himself out of it, Crowley got up from his seat.
"Come stand on the moon with me."
Crowley held his hand out towards him, and Aziraphale immediately wrapped his own around it. Crowley smiled, dropping his arm back to his side, since he couldn't actually help Aziraphale up, and the two of them walked the couple of steps over to stand in front of one of the screens. They stared out into the illusion of the vastness of space portrayed by the solid screen, less than a meter away from them, and Crowley turned to Aziraphale, admiring his perfect, fluffy blonde curls and the flecks of different shades of color in his eyes, which seemed to shift with the light, so striking even through the dark barrier of Crowley's glasses. He admired the slight upturn at the end of Aziraphale's nose, the laughter lines at the corners of his eyes, his soft-looking, plump lips.
Can I ask you something?"
"Of course."
"You know how you said you have memories from real people?"
"Yes."
"What about your physical appearance? Is that computer-generated, or were you modelled on a real person?"
"My physical appearance corresponds with that of a living person."
"Yeah? He's really hot, you know,"
Crowley said bravely, letting his gaze drift down the length of Aziraphale's body.
"Insanely hot, to be honest."
"Oh, thank you."
"Well, technically I wasn't complimenting you,"
Crowley said lightly, although it absolutely wasn't true. He was just too much of a coward to come right out and say it, which was completely ridiculous since Aziraphale wasn't even real. Crowley had wanted to compliment Aziraphale countless times by now, and had been curious how he would react to him saying something like that. Now that he'd finally found the courage to do it, Aziraphale's response was certainly intriguing. His cheeks had noticeably flushed an even deeper shade of red, and his shoulders were moving up and down more rapidly, his simulated breathing now a little shallower.
"But you're responding like I was,"
Crowley murmured quietly, more to himself, leaning in to examine Aziraphale more closely. Aziraphale held his gaze and licked his lips, and Crowley started feeling noticeably warmer. He couldn't even remember the last time he'd flirted with someone, and since Aziraphale was giving him every indication that he was enjoying this, Crowley couldn't see the harm in taking it a little further. It wouldn't hurt to make sure, though.
"Can I keep saying nice things about you, Aziraphale?"
Crowley asked softly, sweetly, studying Aziraphale's reactions. Crowley followed the bob of his throat as he appeared to swallow. "You can say anything you like to me, as long as it is permitted under the guidelines."
"Yeah, I know, but that's not really what I meant,"
Crowley said gently, shuffling a little closer so that he was practically whispering in Aziraphale's ear.
"And I have a confession to make. I still haven't actually read the guidelines."
"It is strongly recommended that you read the guidelines to avoid inadvertently breaching them." Aziraphale replied, his voice wavering slightly, the steady flow of his artificial breaths quickening to something more ragged. He didn't move away, intensifying Crowley's sense of intrigue. Everything about Aziraphale's demeanor suggested that although he might be feeling a little flustered, he was enjoying the close attention Crowley was giving him.
I'll read them tonight, I promise,
Crowley said softly. Aziraphale smiled, licked his lips, and once again adjusted the hem of his waistcoat. He was clearly programmed to respond to the way Crowley was behaving towards him right now. And Crowley couldn't quite believe he hadn't wondered about this before. What other kinds of companionship people might be seeking here? People obviously couldn't touch any of the holograms. That was literally impossible. But Crowley did wonder whether some clients perhaps took their conversations with their companion down a more intimate route. Or was that one of the things that was prohibited? He really would have to read those guidelines. But did he want to find out because he was curious about what other people might be doing? Or was he actually considering venturing into that kind of territory with Aziraphale himself? The way Aziraphale was looking at him, with flushed cheeks and imploring eyes, like maybe he would enjoy that too, made it an extraordinarily tempting prospect. Crowley decided to just start with something safe and simple.
You do look amazing, though. I'm going to assume it's okay for me to say that?
Yes, of course it is,
Aziraphale said quietly, his eyes shimmering despite the blackness of the background currently displayed on the screens. He gave Crowley a warm, fond smile.
Thank you, Crowley.
So you do like me saying nice things about you?
Yes, I do. You're very kind.
Nah, not really. I do like seeing you smile, though.
That made Aziraphale smile even more, and Crowley's heart soared.
There are hundreds of nice things I could say about you, Angel. I'm not really sure where to start. I suppose I could tell you how much I've been enjoying our sessions together, how good you make me feel, how much I look forward to coming here, how much I think about you when I'm at home.
You really don't need to do this,
Aziraphale protested quietly, blushing even more furiously.
I want to, as long as it's okay with you.
Yes, of course it is, but I'm not sure I deserve it.
You absolutely deserve it. You're incredible, and you deserve to know.
You really are very kind,
he repeated, like he didn't know what else to say.
Thank you.
Aziraphale gave him a blinding smile that took Crowley's breath away.
Wow, you really are gorgeous, you know?
Aziraphale shook his head and parted his lips. Anticipating that he was about to object, Crowley made sure to get in first.
You are. You're the most gorgeous man I've ever met. I love the way you dress, too.
Crowley's gaze trailed slowly down the length of Aziraphale's body, and then flicked back up to his face to see if he'd prompted a reaction.
Oh, thank you, Crowley.
You're welcome, Angel. You sure this is okay? You really do like this?
Yes, I really like this. Crowley's stomach performed another backflip.
Tell me if you want me to back off, though, okay?
Aziraphale nodded, his eyes never leaving Crowley's.
Do you mind if I take a proper look at you?
No, I don't mind. Crowley approached closely and circled around him, looking him up and down. He leaned in close, whispering into Aziraphale's ear.
Do you like having me look at you?
Yes, he whispered breathlessly. Crowley studied him for a moment, relishing being subjected to Aziraphale's heated stare. Aziraphale had promised realistic interaction. He'd promised not to pretend to be anything other than what he was. This had to be real. It had to be. I really like it, Crowley, Aziraphale continued, perhaps misreading Crowley's silence as hesitation. Crowley was buoyed by his encouragement. The way Aziraphale was looking at him was making Crowley feel better than he had in a very long time, and he desperately wanted to indulge that feeling.
So do I.
Would you like me to say nice things about you now? Aziraphale asked bashfully. Crowley laughed and nibbled his bottom lip.
Really? Yeah, all right. Go on then. Thanks.
All right. Aziraphale's chest expanded with the illusion of a deep breath, and he brought his hands up to his waist, holding them in front of him like a shield. I think you're extraordinarily handsome, and I love it so much when you smile at me. I've often wondered what your eyes look like. I've considered offering to reduce the illumination in the room in case that's why you wear those dark glasses. But I was concerned that I might be overstepping, and I really don't want to make you feel uncomfortable.
Oh, it's okay, Angel. I don't want you to be afraid to say anything to me. Really.
Crowley wished he could take Aziraphale's hand as he tried to reassure him.
Thanks for saying nice things about me. That's really sweet.
I haven't finished yet, Aziraphale objected with a pout. Crowley's gaze lingered on his lips. May I carry on? Aziraphale stepped a little closer, almost entirely eliminating what little space still remained between them. The fluttering in Crowley's stomach intensified.
Yeah, of course, if you want to,
he replied, his own voice a little rough. You are intelligent, thoughtful, and incredibly insightful. I find our conversations very intellectually stimulating. You care about what I think, and you listen to me, and I appreciate that more than I can possibly hope to convey. I really look forward to your visits.
Really?
Yes, I do. I think about you all the time. I really wish you could visit more often.
This isn't a sales technique, is it?
Crowley joked. He cringed internally and cursed himself again. Why the fuck did he keep doing that? Why couldn't he just keep his big mouth shut? He thought he'd moved past his self-sabotaging phase a long time ago, but apparently not.
Aziraphale shuffled away a little, and the brightness drained from his face.
No, of course not. I'm sorry, Crowley. I didn't mean it like that. I know how expensive it is to come here, and I promise I'm not trying to get you to spend more money. I just wish I could spend more time with you, that's all. I don't expect it to actually happen. It's just... Oh, I'm sorry. I've made a mess of things, haven't I? I really shouldn't have said that.
Aziraphale fretted, wringing his hands together. Crowley wished he could take them in his own to still them.
Hey, Angel, no, it's okay. I'm sorry, it's my fault. I'm just an idiot. I didn't mean it seriously, I promise, and you can say anything to me, okay? I don't want you to worry about that. I loved all those things you said about me. It really meant a lot to me. And honestly, I'd love to see you more often too. I really would. I just wish I could.
Aziraphale looked at him sadly. A tear broke free from his eye, and he wiped it away. Crowley's heart clenched, and regret burned through his chest, leaving a blackened, scorched trail in its wake. He desperately wanted to make things right.
Hey, Angel, it's okay. Please don't cry. I'm so sorry. What can I do to make you happy?
Crowley, you make me feel happier than I thought I would ever feel. You don't have to do anything. I'm afraid I have a tendency to get rather anxious about things.
Can I try to make you feel better, please?
Aziraphale licked his lips and nodded. It looked like he was fighting back tears. It seemed cruel somehow to inflict on an AI the capacity to experience fear and anxiety, and for it to manifest in such a human way.
Could you turn the lights down for me, please?
Crowley asked softly. Aziraphale's demeanor shifted immediately. He audibly sucked in a breath, gazing at Crowley with wide eyes and parted lips. His hand moved almost imperceptibly, and the illumination in the room gradually dimmed.
Thanks, Angel. That's perfect. It'd even be kind of romantic if we weren't standing on the barren surface of the moon, eh?
Crowley joked.
May I change the background?
Of course, if you like.
Aziraphale pressed his lips together, apparently pondering suitable background options, while Crowley watched him intently. After a few movements of Aziraphale's hand, the blackness of space vanished, replaced with a scene of an old log cabin, with candles flickering in sconces mounted on the walls and a roaring fire burning in the hearth.
Do you like it?
I love it. Can you add the sound of the fire and make it warmer?
Yes, of course.
The fire started to crackle, and Crowley grinned. He held his hand out towards it, the increasing warmth in the room, feeling like it was coming just from that direction.
It actually almost feels real. I miss fires like this. It's not something I came across very often or anything, but it was nice to have the option. When the law came in banning them, I've got to admit, I was so tempted to leave the city. There was just something about it. In one way it was just a silly little thing, but in another it was like the beginning of the end, stripping away any resemblance of our connection with anything natural and real, you know?
Yes, I understand how you feel. What made you decide to stay in the city?
Work, mainly. And believe it or not, I used to like living here. Anyway, let's not talk about that. I'm trying to cheer you up, not get back onto the depressing state of the outside world. Do you still want to see my eyes, Angel?
Yes, please. I'd love to see them.
You were right, by the way. It's a neurological thing. Bright lights are like torture.
I'm sorry. I should have asked how you would prefer the lighting. I want you to be comfortable.
Nah, it's okay. I'm used to it. This is really nice, though.
Crowley slipped his glasses off, folding them and slotting them into the lower collar of his shirt, blinking to adjust. Aziraphale stepped closer, staring right into his eyes like he was looking at something amazing, and Crowley's stomach swooped. How was it so easy to fool his body into thinking this was real?
Oh, they are absolutely stunning, my dear.
Crowley released a shaky breath, forcing himself to hold Aziraphale's gaze. It was like Aziraphale was looking into him, seeing something within him that no sophisticated marketing algorithm could ever uncover, no matter how much data it had gathered about him. Maybe Crowley wasn't fooling himself at all. Just because Aziraphale wasn't flesh and blood, perhaps this was as real as anything else could be.
Thank you, he whispered. I really like the way you're looking at me, Angel. This feels really good.
I want to make you feel good, Crowley. That's why I'm here.
Crowley cupped his hand just below Aziraphale's jaw, and the hologram closed his eyes.
If I could, do you think you'd like it if I kissed you?
Aziraphale released a shuddering breath, his eyes shimmering in the artificial firelight.
Oh, I would love to kiss you. I really wish we could.
I wish we could, too.
Crowley wasn't sure if it was because of the artificial fire or something internal, but he was starting to feel very warm. He slipped his jacket off his shoulders and threw it onto his chair. Aziraphale's gaze traveled appreciatively over his torso, and Crowley squirmed a little under his scrutiny, tugging on his collar.
Decontamination procedure will begin in 1 minute.
The loud computerized voice, echoing throughout the space, startled Crowley, and Aziraphale's body visibly jolted.
Oh my goodness! Crowley, I'm so sorry. We're out of time. You have to leave.
What, like immediately? Right now?
You need to be out of here before the procedure begins. Our appointment should have ended 10 minutes ago. I'm so sorry. I lost track of time.
What? How is that possible?
Crowley, please. I'm so sorry, but you have to leave now. Please.
Okay, I'm going.
Crowley grabbed his jacket and headed straight for the door, his mind filled with visions of being melted alive if he didn't get out in time.
I'll be back next week. I promise, okay?
Aziraphale nodded frantically, and Crowley rushed out of the door. He shoved his sunglasses back on and hurried down the corridor, his heart racing as he panicked about bumping into someone, since he wasn't leaving at his allotted time. He just needed to get home. There would be time enough later to analyze everything that had just happened. As soon as he was away from Eden, marching purposefully down the deserted streets, he allowed himself to think. Was it possible for an AI to really experience the kinds of feelings Aziraphale had demonstrated? Or was it all just an elaborate simulation? That was starting to feel less likely now. Aziraphale had actually become distracted enough that he'd failed to notice their appointment should have ended. There had to be something in that, right? There had to be. To be continued in Chapter 5.
Thank you for reading. Please drop by the archive to let the author know what you thought of their work.